Welcome to the WoW podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and insights from our university community. Tune in for conversations about growth, success, and the power of communication in the academic world. So get ready to soar with us on the wings of wisdom.
So today in our Wings of Wisdom episode podcast for the Writing and Communication Center, we have my good friend and colleague and a great friend to Ashland University, Dr. Maura Grady. And she joined the university in 2011 and brings a wealth of experience from her studies and her world experience as living abroad and living both here domestically. She has been at various universities for her studies, which we'll also inquire about. She's constantly been acknowledged for her dedication to student success. She's known for a vibrant and enthusiastic teaching style, which she puts in care, education, and contentment to her students at the forefront while creating an enjoyable, very happy classrooms. There's a lot of, I walk through Bixler all the time, and it's very happy classrooms. And she creates a wonderful learning environment. So join us as we delve into her insights on fostering student success and her journey in shaping academic landscape at Ashland University. So thank you very much and welcome. And we really appreciate your time and all the insights that you're going to offer here, because some students who are not in the literatures and that don't pass through some of the English classes might not know about you. And I think you'll have a lot more fans, hopefully, after this. But I just always hear great things about you.
Well, thank you. That was a lovely introduction. I'm very happy to be here today.
Oh, thank you. What could you tell us about, so we have a lot of undergrads here that we interact with all the time. What could you tell us about your undergrad experience?
Well, that's a big question. I will tell you, I didn't know whether I wanted to go to college right away. I was working at a job that I really enjoyed and in high school, and I was really excited about maybe continuing to work there. I was very fortunate in that my late father was a chemistry professor at a small college about the same size as Ashland, called St. Michael's College in Colchester, Vermont, where I grew up. He had passed away, but they had generously extended the tuition benefit to me, even though he wasn't alive anymore. And so my mother, when I said, I don't think I want to go to college, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I needed to have it figured out. I thought I needed to know what I wanted my career to be, what I wanted to study. So I told my mom, I think I want to figure that out first before I go to college. And she said, no, you're going to go to college. It's free. You can live on campus. And I don't care what you major in. This is what my mother said. She said, you can major in whatever you want. And then you can go work at the bakery after you graduate. And because it's just going to get harder to do it as you get older. So I had enjoyed a lot of things about high school. I had a high school mentor, the yearbook advisor, and an English teacher who really I am still in touch with, who is a wonderful mentor. And I thought, well, maybe I want to do teaching. Maybe I want to do something like that. But a lot of my classes in high school, I was pretty bored. And I didn't really enjoy most of the subjects that I was studying. And I was the kind of student, unfortunately, who, if I was not really interested, I didn't put in a lot of effort into my classes in high school. But then when I got to college and I knew I was getting this great benefit of going to college for free, I figured if I wasn't putting everything I had into it, I was wasting my time. So I decided, all right, I'm really going to try with all my classes. And it was really interesting for the first time. I feel like this is what I loved about college that I didn't feel so much in high school, even though I went to a very good high school, was that all of my professors really knew their subject matter well, and they were all excited to talk about it. And every subject was interesting to me, even the subjects that I wasn't that psyched about, like math for me. I still loved the professor and I worked really hard. I was just really determined to do well. I loved that I got a syllabus that told me exactly what I needed to do and laid out the whole semester for me. That really changed for me in college. So I was a very good college student, undergrad. After 2 years at St. Michael's College, I had run through all the German that they had, and I was already taking classes over at the State University, the University of Vermont. So I decided my junior year to transfer to the University of Vermont. By then, I had declared an English major because I had wanted to get into a majors only poetry class with a particular professor at St. Mike's. And so I changed my major to English just to get into that class. And then I liked it and I just stayed in it. I added a German major as well and did a year abroad. I did a lot of music as an undergrad, and transferring twice, I never really felt like I had one college that was my home. But yeah, I'm kind of trailing off here because there are a lot of memories, but I really learned how to learn at that small college that was a lot like Ashland. I really learned how to go and talk to my professors. I learned how to go to study sessions if anybody was offering that before an exam, if a professor was offering that. I went to office hours if I didn't understand something, because I was really determined that I was going to do well in those classes, or at least I was going to try really hard. If sometimes you can't help not being great at a subject, but I did everything that I could to try to learn everything. And so when I transferred to a larger university, that helped me a lot because I was already in the habit of going and talking to my professors and going to office hours and asking my questions until I got the answers.
Now, being on the other side of things, could you talk about your perspective as the importance of your students coming in for office hours? What does it mean to you when your students come into office hours?
Well, I really encourage my students to come and talk to me. Sometimes I require it. So for longer projects, I'll require a mandatory conference with me, just 10 or 15 minutes, where they come in and talk with me about their project, just to touch base and make sure we're having that conversation. I also encourage them to come and talk to me early in the semester, but I understand not every student feels comfortable doing that. A lot of students have a lot of anxiety about talking to their professors, even though I think everybody at Ashland University, we are here because we love teaching, we love our students, and we have office hours. But I think the term office hours can be confusing to students. I think a lot of them think, oh, this must be my professor's work time and I shouldn't bother them. So sometimes I've called them drop-in hours on the syllabus instead of office hours. I offer to meet students on Teams because we have students who are commuting or have unusual schedules. I try to acknowledge that I know it's difficult for them sometimes, for some students to come and see their professors, but it's such a huge benefit. If there's one takeaway from being in college, it's learn to go and ask for help before you really need it. Get to know your professors, get to have them understand that you're trying, that you're working on learning these things you're trying to communicate.
And I would agree, as professors, it means a lot when our students come in during office hours. And even if they just want to chat and say hello,
Yes.
if they want to ask for help, that's wonderful too. We're very happy to do that. But the office hours are just an incredible tool that students could use. And it will only benefit them, because just walking in the door makes us happy to see them. And we remember that.
Yeah. I tell them, especially when I teach first year students, I tell them a lot of what you're doing is banking some goodwill from your professors. So come to class, be present, be prepared, come and see them in office hours. And the professors will be more generous with you if you run into trouble later in the semester, if they know that you've made that effort early on. It's difficult if you've kind of been missing a lot of classes and you haven't come in to see us, and then something happens. It's a little harder for us because we don't know you as well to know how to help you at that point. So yeah, it's advice I give to all my first year students for sure, that especially at a place like Ashland, we're a smaller place. All of us who work here came here because we wanted to work at a smaller place and we want to get to know our students. I live in town right near campus. When my kids were little, they did swim lessons at the rec center. I go to the plays. I run into my students all the time, and I love that. I love getting to know my students and having them feel comfortable with approaching me about any issue, but also just to know them as people. And I tell them all to connect with me on LinkedIn during the class so that I can stay in touch with them and see what they end up doing after they graduate. It's just great, especially if I'm at a conference or something, I run into former students, or, stay in touch with what they're up to, and they get married and have kids. It's so nice to really keep up with them.
Right. And I could tell you, as I've known like a good number of your students now, like they could see how invested you are in them. So it's certainly appreciated. Changing a little bit. So you went from Vermont and then you went to California,
Yes.
and now you're in the Midwest.
Yes.
So can you talk about a little bit, like, so a lot of our students, many of them in my class that I've been talking to lately, they haven't gone too many places outside Ohio or even the Midwest. So can you talk a little bit about the different changes of culture? And then obviously you spent time in Germany, so if you could share that.
Sure. Well, I like I said, I grew up in Vermont, and we lived in Vermont because my late father was a chemistry professor. He was the first in his family to get an advanced degree, and he got a PhD. He originally went into the Army when he was 18. And then he decided that a career in the Army was not for him, and he would go back to school. He didn't do well his first semester. So after he flunked out, he said, well, I'll try the Army, see if that works for me. And he realized that wasn't it. He did his time that he had signed up for in the Army. And he was an amateur photographer. He took beautiful photographs of Alaska, where he was stationed. And anyway, we didn't live near any family in Vermont, because when you're an academic, you go where the job is, and it's not necessarily near your family. So all of my youth was spent either being at home, or for vacations, we'd pile into the car and drive 9 or 16 hours to go hang out with our cousins and play a lot of cards. And I grew up in Vermont. I went to high school there. When I was a junior in high school, my sister, who's older than me, was studying abroad in Vienna. And I went to visit her there. I was already taking German in high school, and I had a great time there, and I knew that I wanted to study abroad someday. Went to college in Vermont, transferred to the University of Vermont after a couple of years at St. Michael's, and then I studied for a year in Marburg, Germany, which I picked on purpose because it was a smaller city. When I went to Vienna to visit my sister, I was very excited to try out my German, but it's such an international city. If they even get a whiff that you're an American, they don't speak German to you. And I found it frustrating. So I wanted to go somewhere where there were not a lot of American tourists or English speaking tourists. And the city was perfect. It was a really intensive program. You had to have a phone interview in German before you went, and there was a very intensive language test you had to take to matriculate. And so we spent a month preparing for that test, and then took the test, and then.
And I imagine you had to have a certain GPA even to apply.
Yes, probably. I don't remember whether I did or not, but probably I did. You had to have a certain number of German classes, and you had to be able to get through this interview on the phone. And then the program was sponsored through Millersville University, which is in Pennsylvania. So a lot of the people on that program were from Pennsylvania. And that was a great experience. I did a whole year there, didn't come home for Christmas. I was there the whole year, and my German got really good. I hung out with a lot of Germans, and tried to speak German most of the time. Came back, finished my senior year of college with an English and German degree, And then after that, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I got a job working for a tech startup in Vermont, and I worked in marketing and sales and eventually sales management. I'd never taken a business class, but I knew how to adapt writing and communication to a lot of different situations. Sure, things are different now. This was quite a while ago. So I think it was a little easier to just kind of show up somewhere and be a good learner and be able to get promoted. I know it's much, much harder to get that first job now. But I did that for a few years. And then I worked for an international choir touring company where they needed people to have a second language and experience with marketing and sales. That was a great job, but I was really feeling the itch to go to grad school. So my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, was going to start grad school in Nevada, in Reno, Nevada, at the University of Nevada, Reno, where he got a degree in business. So I started looking for schools out west that were going to be, kind of near him. And I was lucky enough to get into the University of California, Davis. They have a great TA program where I didn't pay tuition. And in fact, you get a stipend for being a TA or teaching some classes. So I didn't have to go into any debt to go to grad school. So I was in California for a while. California, the University of California at Davis has an exchange with a university in Mainz, Germany. So after I finished my master's degree, I went and taught in Germany for a year at a university in their American Studies program, which was a great experience. And then I came back, finished my dissertation. I got a job in Reno, Nevada after that at the university. It was a 3-year job doing administration and teaching. So it was assistant director of what they call the core writing program, the first year writing program, freshman English. And then I taught upper division film classes because that had been my focus in graduate school. And so I was there for 3 years. I had 2 daughters while I was there. And when that job was coming to an end, I went on the market to look around for a job that would be closer to the East Coast because most of my family is on the East Coast. And I was fortunate enough to see this job at Ashland University. At the time, they were looking for someone who had film studies experience because they were looking to start a film major. They also wanted someone who had developed curriculum and who had taught a lot of composition. So it was a little bit of an odd assortment. Academic jobs can be that way sometimes. They kind of throw everything in that they would like to have ideally. And I interviewed for the job and I was offered the job. And I had another job offer that year, but I was really excited about coming to Ashland. So I turned down that other job and came here. The film major, we had a proposal, we developed some classes for it, and then it never got off the ground. The provost at the time didn't want to add any new programs, so we didn't end up getting that film major put together, which is a shame because I think it would be a great major to have here. But we still have a lot of the classes, and so I teach mostly film classes, but I also teach literature and everything. I've digressed from your question, so.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Actually, I think that the students will be really interested in this and your fellow faculty. What kind of films do you discuss in your classes?
It depends on the class I'm teaching. So next semester, I'm teaching English 371, literature and film, which is designated as a core humanities course. When I first got here, it was a core aesthetics course. So we focused a lot on the film aesthetics in the class and less on the literature side of things. Since it's moved to core humanities, now we really focus on questions of adaptation. So we will read a text that has been adapted into a film, and we'll do kind of our literature stuff there, analyzing, close reading, really examining things like metaphor, plot, character, theme, all of the things that people might be familiar with from prior literature classes if they've taken them in high school or college. And then we look at what choices were made in the adaptation, the film adaptation. So we do learn a lot about film techniques. The students learn a lot of film terms and learn how to recognize them and analyze why they might be used in a particular way in a film, in a scene. The reason that we do that is I know that people have studied or read a book and then watched a film adaptation, and a lot of times I hear from students, oh well, I always like the book better, I never understand why they change things, and that is not a very productive discussion to have in a class. So what I try to get students to focus on is, well, you may not like the choices that the film production team has made, but let's try to figure out why those choices were made and what the effects are of those choices. So if we're building suspense in a scene, why have they shot it in this particular way? Why have they used music in this way? Why have they used editing in this way? What work is the lighting doing? What work is the performance by the actors doing? And what about the screenplay? And so we can have a much richer discussion in that way. We don't do too many films just because we want to go really in depth. So usually 4 or 5 films during a full semester, and try to change up the texts and the films every couple of years to keep things fresh and have some newer films. But there are a lot of classics that I do put into the rotation. I've done a lot of research on the film The Shawshank Redemption, which is adapted from a novella, a short novel by Stephen King. So we always do that one because it's a wonderful novella and it's a fantastic film adaptation. And there's so much to be learned from it. But also because then I can take my students over to the Mansfield Reformatory where the movie was made, and we can tour the building and see the Shawshank Museum and have that experience too.
And you also are very generous to donate your time on the board at that facility.
I am privileged to be part of this organization. It is a nonprofit, and I've been on the board since 2017, and I'm pleased to serve as the board president at the moment. I'm in my 2nd year in that role, and then I'll be past president after another year. It's been such a privilege to be involved with that organization. The purpose of that organization is to restore and maintain that historic building, and that is a site of education. It's the State Prison History Museum for Ohio, so we have artifacts from all over the state. We have a wonderful museum curator, and I love bringing students over there. It's such a treat.
Yeah, I someday I really, really look forward to see it because it's just like a incredible history associated with that space.
Yes.
Obviously, we're not good, but because it's a reformatory. But the institution is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm a fan of like the haunted tours and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, most of my students, if they've been there before, they've been there for the Halloween haunted prison or ghost hunts or other events like that.
Going back to what you said, you mentioned that, students say like, oh, I like the book so much better than the film. Can you talk about maybe one of your favorite adaptations to film and one of your least favorite adaptations to film?
Well, Shawshank is right up there, I think. I try to, when I teach the creative writing workshop in screenwriting, I have the students read the Shawshank Redemption screenplay as well by Frank Darabont, because it's a brilliant piece of screenwriting, but it's also a fantastic adaptation. The novella itself would seem unadaptable. Stephen King thought it was unadaptable. It's the memory of one character. So it's the character of Red in the book, just thinking about his life, and his memories are all mixed up. His timelines are all mixed up. He's just kind of got memories floating in and out of his mind all the time. And he has a tremendous sense of guilt for a crime he committed. And we really don't have too many characters that show up in the novella. He sort of mentions people in passing, but there's no real development of a lot of characters except for one named Andy Dufresne, who becomes his friend. But in the film, Darabont gives us a little ensemble of characters who Andy and Red talked to. He gives us a character named Brooks Hatlin, who's an old convict who is a living symbol of institutionalization, which is a theme that Stephen King can talk about in the novel all he wants. But in a novel, in a film, you need to see those themes embodied. You can't just have someone talk about them, or it's very unsatisfying as a filmmaker.
Is he the one that gets to leave?
Yes.
But then he commits another crime, so he goes back because he couldn't be on the outside?
No, he wants to commit another crime. He's stopped from committing the crime, and he ends up getting released and having a very tragic ending. But it's a symbol of what can happen to a person if they're in prison too long, that they just can't adapt to being on the outside again. Darabont has a symbol of a crow that one of the inmates keeps inside that can't live on the outside as well. I mean, he also, Darabont builds a lot of suspense in the film that isn't necessarily there in the same way in the book. So there are a lot of ways that also, one of the key things that students say in our initial discussions that they don't like about adaptations is they say, I don't like if they change the story. I don't like if the characters don't look like they were described in the book. I don't like when they combine characters or eliminate characters. I don't like that. And Darabont does all of those things, but the students agree that those choices work really well and that it still feels like the same story. So it's a great example to show it can break all those rules that you thought were the things that were make or break for a good adaptation and still be a satisfying movie that you love very much. The character of Red in the book is a white Irish guy. He's played by Morgan Freeman in the movie. And everybody loves Morgan Freeman in that performance. I never hear anyone say, well, he didn't look like he did in the book. If you talk about how Harrison Ford was considered for that part for a while, people go, oh, no. Morgan Freeman was perfect. So it does help students kind of let go of that idea that they might have had before. If things don't feel exactly like the book, then they feel unsatisfying. I don't think any adaptation is bad. They're all interesting, even if I didn't feel like it worked terribly well. So that's what I try to tell my students too. Let's focus on why it didn't work for you, or what was interesting about the choices that the filmmaker picked.
Did you ever watch a movie that you said, I like this one better than the book?
Yes. Yeah, it's one that I thought about teaching a few years ago. It was a Japanese manga, was the source text. And I had seen the film first, and it's a brilliant film. It's called Edge of Tomorrow. It's a terrible title. It was also, when they released it on DVD, they called it Live, Die, Repeat.
But it's funny how they do the different translations.
Yeah, they tried to rebrand it a little for the DVD release because it didn't do that well in theaters, even though audiences and critics really loved it. It's fantastic kind of time looping science fiction story. And I found out, I loved the film. I think it's directed by Doug Liman. And I can't remember right now who wrote the screenplay. I think Christopher McQuarrie wrote the screenplay, and he's a terrific screenwriter. He wrote some of the X-Men movies, and yeah, he's just really great. And the film was brilliant editing, great production. And I really wanted to teach the film. So I found out it was based on a manga, and I read the manga, and I really didn't like the manga. I didn't like the characters as they were portrayed in the book. Another one that I've taught before where I love the adaptation and I love what it did with the story was Devil in a Blue Dress that stars Denzel Washington. And it's based on a series of novels about a detective in LA after World War II called the Easy Rawlins series. And there was a whole series of the novels, and they thought that they would make a bunch of films, and then the film didn't do that well. And so they didn't make any more films. But the film itself, it's directed by Carl Franklin, a great African-American filmmaker. He made a terrific film called One False Move. And I love that film. And I think the adaptation is very interesting, but the students didn't respond to it in the same way that, I might have liked. So I taught it a few times. And after a while, I was like, okay, they're just not enjoying
Then they
this.
just
They're not
change,
getting
yeah.
a lot out of it. So, I haven't taught that one in a while, but
Yeah, when you
I
mentioned
love it.
when you mentioned Stephen King, he's kind of a funny writer because um he sells a lot of stuff. I mean, he writes so many books, and he doesn't always get along with the directors. Like I don't know if I could tell you I like the movie The Shining better than I like the novel. I like them both for their own reasons. But
Mhm.
King
He
hated
did not
Kubrick.
like that adaptation. Yes,
Yeah.
famously, the
And
Kubrick
Kubrick did
adaptation.
a lot of things to like make him mad, like just like change stuff on purpose to aggravate him.
King doesn't love when people analyze his work so much.
Mhm.
And I think Frank Darabont, who wrote and directed Shawshank Redemption, has also written and directed adaptations of The Green Mile and The Mist by Stephen King. And I think those are all really good adaptations. So I think King likes those adaptations and really owns them and is okay with them existing, whereas not
Mhm.
every adaptation of his work has he liked very much. But in all
Yeah.
of my classes, in whether it's a film class or a writing class or a literature class, I really am interested in what the students think about whatever we're reading or watching. So I have them do a lot of work that shows their engagement with the texts or the films, because that's the most interesting thing to me, is what they think about it. I know what I
Mhm.
think about it already, but I want us to have a great
Yeah.
discussion. And so I want students to be able to write about and understand what they feel about something and why, so that they can point to a line in the text or a moment in the film where they really have recognized something and can identify something that is meaningful to them, and be able to articulate that to somebody else, why it makes sense and why it means something.
Yeah. And with the adaptations, I mean, sometimes, like for example, I really enjoyed the movie Nocturnal. Well, I don't enjoy it, but I think it was a really solid picture. But I don't like the book Tony and Susan
Mm.
that it was based on. So it's just kind of funny. And like, do your students, are they really open to talking about how they could have some kind of disconnect between the film and the literature?
Yes, yes. So the text book that I tend to use most often, I haven't found a better book for teaching film adaptation to students. Really tries to get away from the language, what they call the language of fidelity, right? This was a faithful adaptation, or this was true to the book, that kind of language. They say that's not really productive. Instead, what we should think about is whether this is a close adaptation, a loose adaptation, or an intermediate adaptation. And the book has definitions for what those are. So we try to approach it that way. That encourages students to be a little more analytical in their approach and a little more clinical, because books are so personal, and you have such an intimate personal relationship with a book. It's something that we talk about a lot in my classes, is when you read a book, you get to picture all the characters, you get to picture the setting, everything in it. And then if somebody makes a film, they've got to make choices. And those choices aren't necessarily what you had in mind as the reader and now the viewer of the film. So recognizing that and why they might have made those different choices, I think leads to a really interesting and fun discussion. And my students say that they never watch films the same after taking these classes, because once
Mhm.
you've learned a bit about how films are made, you just have your analysis hat on all the time. It doesn't mean you stop enjoying films, but there's an extra layer of enjoyment.
Yeah.
Um, I tell my students it's like the difference between going to a basketball game when you know all the stats and you know who all the players are and you know the coaches and you know their records, you can go there and just watch a basketball game. But if you know all that extra stuff, you're going to be seeing other things that somebody who's just walking in and seeing the game without that knowledge doesn't necessarily see. They can still enjoy that game very much, but the level at which you're enjoying it with your extra knowledge it's on a different plane of existence. And I think that's a great way to be in the world, especially when we have so much media around us. You can really get a lot more out of it.
And after doing some limited film studies myself, I always found myself trying to think about why they made that decision and who influenced them. Like, what director do they like, and how they would follow little winks from that director.
Right.
And it's just like more fun to watch a movie when you can think about it on that scale.
Well, most students, before they take a film class, they don't think about directors or screenwriters or production designers and what role they have in a film. They know the actors. And so that's the person that they associate with that film. But after taking the class, you start to recognize what role the director has and what role some of the producer has, and location managers, and all of the other roles that go into making a film or a television program. And so that's a big achievement for a lot of students, is figuring out, oh, there's a lot more to this than I knew. I mean, that's what college is for. And these are core classes. They're also classes that majors take. So we have we have 3 film classes at Ashland. We have the screenwriting workshop. That's a creative writing class. Creative writing majors take that, but I always get students from theater and journalism and digital media and just other people who might be interested in making films or learning about screenwriting also take that class. And then we have the literature.
It's a really fun class. Yeah.
Yeah. You stepped in for me when I was out on medical leave to teach some of that. And you got to see that. It's a great class to teach. The students are brilliant. I encourage them to write a full screenplay during the semester, and people do a great job, and they workshop together. It's a whole class workshop, which if you've never taken a creative writing class, it means that the subject of the class for the most part is the student's writing. So each week a student will submit however many pages, and the whole class will talk about it. It's a smaller class, 15 people or fewer. And so you get feedback from your professor, but also from all these other writers who are really invested in helping you develop your story and your screenplay. So we have literature and film, we have the screenwriting workshop, and we also have global film, which is a class that I teach and other faculty teach that fulfills a CCI requirement. And it's a class that I created for the major, but it's still around. And
I believe you typically do more German film for that one, and then Dr. Gray does more French.
Yes. So it's designed to have a different focus depending on who's teaching it. So yes, I teach it as German film because that's one of my other areas. And I think there's so many wonderful German films. And the idea of that class is that you're immersing yourself into the history and culture of somewhere else, somewhere that isn't the United States, and that is a different language and has a different history, has a different cinematic history. So during the semester, you're watching and reading about the films, you're learning about the culture and the language of the country that produced those films. And I love that class too. So that's a great one to teach. And those are our 3 main film classes. But I teach a composition as well. I mean, part of my job is directing the first year writing program. So I love when I get to teach freshmen. I'm excited to teach them next semester. And I've also taught Beowulf and early English literature, early American literature, and other kinds of special topics classes. German literature, we have a class called German Literature and Translation, so I've taught that too. That's one of the things I love about being at Ashland, is just getting to do lots of different things.
Yeah, and you've taught about a million different things. Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun for us. And the other point I wanted to make before we transition a little bit is that we do so enjoy when we have a student come in with their first year and they come back to our
Mm,
classes in the
yes.
future. We love
Yep.
seeing the same faces. We obviously love new faces too, but
Hmm.
we just really are so happy to see students that want to keep taking classes with us.
Yes.
So you do so much for students, but you also do a great deal for faculty, and I could attest to that as you are one of my bosses, and you run the Accent on Communicating program where you help our faculty. And could you explain that a little bit?
Yes, Accent on Communicating was created a number of years ago at Ashland University because we recognized that students uh, don't learn everything they need to know about writing and communication in their composition and communication core classes. So, talking to students and faculty, we would hear again and again from faculty, well, my students really can't write these things that I need them to write, uh, and realizing that faculty needed to do more to teach students how to write in their specific disciplines um, led us to be thinking about a field that's called WID, Writing in the Disciplines, where faculty receive training and support to help students learn how to write in science classes, in math classes, and in history classes, because even though a student may have taken composition 1 and 2 and done well in those classes, it's a completely different audience, completely different context, writing style when they get into those more advanced courses in their major or in the core as well. So students writing for business audiences, students writing um, in the health sciences. These are different kinds of writing. They present different challenges. And even if a student has learned well how to write for composition, and we really try in composition to help students learn how to transfer those skills to other contexts, it's still something new for them. And when people are confronted with new information, new challenges, their writing skills tend to fall off a little bit because people are grappling with the content or they're grappling with this whole new audience. So you can even see students kind of regress a little bit in their writing skills when they get to a new context, a new challenging situation. So we saw a need to help faculty know how to adapt their teaching a bit and make time for writing instruction, and to help them understand how they could communicate uh, their wishes or their requirements to students a little better so that students are clear on what they need to do, what they need to produce for their faculty. And then there's also a field called writing across the curriculum, which focuses on just general writing skills at a higher level that can transfer across all kinds of different contexts. And this helps students while they're in college, but it also helps them when they get out of college and they're having to produce written and writing and communication projects in their professional lives and their workplaces. Of course, that project started in 2017, I think, and we hired our first coordinator for that position, who was also the associate director of the Writing Center. And we had a pilot where we got a number of faculty from different disciplines who were excited about trying out some new methods. We were able to get some funding that reduced class sizes for those faculty because they were having to do more reading and responding to student work. That's something that's really important to teach in across all disciplines, is the idea that students need to draft, get feedback, and then revise. But faculty who are teaching especially content heavy courses felt like, well, I have all this content I have to do. How am I going to teach the writing part as well and make time for that? So a lot of it is working with faculty to help show them that there are a variety of different ways to teach that content, and that writing can be a thinking process method that can really help students learn that content more quickly and in more depth. We got a great response from faculty at the end of that pilot that they're Students' writing was better. Their discussions were richer. Students came out with a much better sense of what they had learned. And unfortunately, COVID happened and we had to cut some budgets. And one of the budgets that got cut was the Accent on Communicating budget. We were able to revive it in a limited way after the pandemic, and that's the state it's in now. So we don't have the budget anymore for those reduced class sizes, unfortunately, but we're still working with faculty to try to show them what principles will work well for their classes and give them resources that will help them teach their students to write and communicate better. And we have increased supports for students. So we have embedded coaches that started under the Accent on Communicating project. Those embedded coaches are writing and communication coaches who come to classes. So they may be in the class all the time, or they may come to some classes and help out with workshops and drafting and things like that. Excuse me. So that is a really cool project to be a part of. And I get to work with people like you, Andrew. I get to work with the Writing and Communication Center. I was for a time the director of the Writing and Communication Center for 2 years. And so it's very close to my heart. And I enjoy continuing to have a relationship with the WCC and with faculty, working with lots of different faculty and students in all kinds of contexts that have to do with writing and communication. I will just say, obviously, we've got a lot of new and exciting challenges with the advent of generative AI that exists now. And I could talk about that too, but I don't know if you have another question.
That is one of my questions. Yeah. So if you want to dive into that one, that's a deep pull.
So most students know about things like ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, some of the AI tools that exist out there, and they can do some pretty amazing stuff. But they are really concerning to people in my discipline for a number of reasons. One of the first reasons that they're concerning is that in order to learn what they have learned, these large language learning models like ChatGPT have done is vacuum up a whole lot of copyrighted material. So they've basically scoured the internet for all of the books that have been published. So you as an author, when you publish a book, you have a copyright. And if people use your work, they're supposed to cite it or compensate you in some way. And all of these large language models have just gone ahead and ignored all those copyrights and sucked up everybody's work and research. And then they regenerated into responses for people without giving any credit or compensation to the authors who've written this stuff. And that's very concerning. As anybody who is a writer and produces original work, to have your work just kind of absorbed and regurgitated in all these contexts that you did not intend and that you didn't give permission for, that's really disturbing. I mean, I've written a book, I've written a lot of articles, and it's a point of pride when people read those and cite those, but I feel like that is something that has happened to train this AI that is really disturbing and concerning. And I know there are a lot of lawsuits pending against these large companies that have developed these AI tools. That's one piece of it. So just the creation of that, I worry about that element of it. In terms of using the tools, what I worry about for students, I think AI is something, it's a great tool. It can be really, really useful in a lot of disciplines. And it's possible to use it well and ethically and effectively. However, the students who don't yet have strong writing skills and don't yet have strong communication skills are really at risk of misrepresenting what it is they are trying to say because they don't necessarily know the material, they don't understand the context for the writing, they don't understand or they don't have experience with writing in the format that they're asking ChatGPT to write in. The people who are using AI really well right now are the people who have learned how to do the work the old-fashioned way. So I was chatting in a coffee shop with a colleague about AI when it was really first coming out a couple of years ago. And somebody next to us said, "Oh, I don't mean to interrupt, but I overheard you talking about AI, and I work in marketing, and I think it's amazing. I love it. I use it all the time." And I said, "Okay, but you've probably been in the business for a while." This was not a young person. And he said, "Yeah, but I know how to do everything. It makes things so much faster for me." And I said, "If you have a really young copywriter who's coming in to do work for you, would you recommend that they use AI?" He said they can't use it very well because they don't know what it's supposed to look like. They don't know how to edit it well. So this is a real dilemma for us as college faculty. We need to help our students learn how to use these tools if they're going to be expected to use them in the workplace. But they may lack the skills that they need to use it well. And especially the students who are really disadvantaged in their writing skills, who just lack those skills to start with. Those are the students for whom it's much easier to spot when AI is being used against the rules. So what do we do as writing teachers? We need to really figure out how we are teaching these fundamental skills that people need to be able to use the AI tools well, without doing it the way we've always done it, which is to ask people to write a lot of papers. If we don't know our students that well, it's really easy for a student to put in the assignment and have it generate a paper, and it won't be a very good paper, not yet. I mean, the AI papers that I've seen are not very good. But that AI is only going to get better. But it's really doing a disservice to those students who need to learn those skills and are going to be at a disadvantage out there in the world when they don't have those skills to rely on.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always tell my students, because I make them do a lot of in-class writing things that I'll look at later. So when I have a big paper, I can see how they write, their style, their mechanics. And I tell them, I need to hear your voice in this document. I need your voice, not something else. And they respond to that. But AI is getting better, but it's still it's so easy to spot, and it's not doing a complete service if you can't figure out how to do the work yourself.
Well, and
it's a tool, just like a dictionary.
Yeah. I think what it is doing for people in the field of writing studies is really making us examine what is it that we really want to teach our students, and what is it that we really want our students to get out of a writing class. It isn't about perfect spelling. It isn't about perfect sentence structure. I mean, we've had tools like Grammarly for a while that'll kind of clean up people's grammar and their spelling. But it's about having your authentic ideas, your own voice, having something to say. And that always matters to me much more than if a sentence is perfectly constructed. Is there an idea here that's exciting? Is there something that you as the student have found that you are excited to talk about and that you think is meaningful and important? That is so much more significant to me as the instructor. So then, however nicely you might write or how great your handwriting is. So those are the things that I think as writing instructors, we've got to really get back to basics on figuring out what we're here for and what it is that our students really need to learn.
Mm-hmm. And I think my last question was going to be about advice for students, but we kind of touched on it just now. And I think you'd agree with me that we could tell our students, you could never cite too much.
Yes, it is possible to go a little overboard with citing, but I think when in doubt, cite.
Right.
That's what I tell them.
If you're paraphrasing, that's like
right.
A lot of the times what we see is they're paraphrasing and then they don't cite the source. We don't want big block quotes throughout the whole paper. We want their own voice, but you have to cite another person's ideas.
If I had one piece of advice for students, it goes along the lines of this, but what you say matters. Your voice matters. And we know you're not perfect. You're not the best writer yet. That's why you're in college, to learn. So I think a lot of students are worried that they don't feel they have something to say that matters, and that they don't feel like they're sure how to answer a prompt or a question that is being asked of them. So again, that's talk to your professors, make sure you understand, ask all those questions. But we really want to know what you think. And it isn't that we have some perfect vision of a paper in mind. We really want your authentic learning experience. If you're having AI do your paper for you, you're not learning anything. And that is the purpose of being here in college. Yes, it's going to be more work to do it yourself, but you want to learn these things. You're here in college for a reason to learn something.
And you're investing in yourself by doing the work.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think we're just about out of time. So I just want to say thank you so much for being so generous with your insights and everything that you do for us every day. I know we see you all the time on campus. You do so much for the Ashland University community. So we're so very grateful. And we just look forward to everything that you are contributing to and will contribute to here with us.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here on this podcast. I'm a big fan of the podcast, and it's great to be here myself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the WoW podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration. Brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University.